Manish Saxena, he is the lead business consultant, Adyam Handwoven, and advisor to Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein, Arrow, etc. Rohit Nag, founder and CEO, Nolva. Amita Desai, I don't think she needs an introduction. I think it would be most befitting to just give her a round of applause for conducting the Hyderabad Literary Festival. Sonam Kalla, who has a soul-touching voice. She is an award-winning singer and composer. Please welcome Manish, Sonam, Amita, and Rohit.
It's okay? Is it audible? Is it?
Can you speak it up?
Okay, now I'll also speak a bit loud. Yeah. So, yeah, like Sangeeta mentioned, it is a really vast topic for us to sort of cover in 40 minutes. But I think that's why I used the support of the people who are with me here, because I wanted to cover a gamut of aspects as it comes to minimalism versus maximalism. And wanted to touch upon it in terms of textiles, in terms of architecture, in terms of art, craft, music, and even the social thinking, which India is very distinctly known for. So what we will attempt to do here is obviously not take sides, because it is not that minimalism is better over maximalism or something is more of a sort of a certified thing, but it is more like a continuum. It is something where we want to see it as to how in the Indian context both minimalism and maximalism exist, and they both have reasons to exist in various parts of our daily life. And this continuum is what makes it interesting. However, unfortunately, what we see is that most of India, seen in the global eye, is seen as maximalist, and therefore it just gets bucketed in a manner where we seem to be outlandish and maximalist. Whereas if we were to go back and look at India in the way it has evolved over the years, or even the way it used to be, even more so, there has been a lot of minimalism in the way we have been. So what I'll do is, because pictures speak more than words, so I'll use a short visual presentation to say what I'm actually saying. So if we can play the, and Vishesh, if you can also just help me with the, so yeah, while we are just setting this up, so just to give you an understanding, so Adyam works with textiles, which is what I lead that initiative. It's a textile initiative, and therefore it's about hand-holding the handloom weavers and sort of creating lovely textiles through their eyes, because it's obviously something where I don't think we need to meddle too much with, because there is so much of repository, there is so much of beauty that lies inherently in our Indian textiles. However, the effort is to actually see as to how it can be made globally relevant, and how it can actually therefore become something which needs to have appreciation across the world. So while we have certain, thank you so much. So while we have certain pieces here, which I will take you through, but let's first look at where do they come from. And I have selected just a few images to show that, the weavers who make these beautiful products actually come from certain surroundings, which actually mean as to why they create what they create. Because I've always believed that textile is never in a silo. It is about what they see around themselves. It's about the motives that they see in the architecture. In fact, many of the textiles, if you see like the Kanchipuram textile, Kanjivarams actually use the motifs of the Kanchipuram temple. Or if you look at Maheshwar actually uses the Ahilya fort motifs. So what you see in the architecture is what finally gets sort of translated. Or this is why you see the chinar leaf in the Sozni embroidery. So all of it is actually about what they see around themselves. And if you look at this image, now I'm just putting some words just to give it a context. So like, look at the palette here. While there is a maximalism in the kind of carving, which you can look at as intricacy, because intricacy is beautiful, and this is something which spells art to us. It is about, I'm so sorry, so the palette is something which is very calming to the eye. Again, if you look at the kind of interiors they have, they're very simplistic, and I think in their whole approach, there is a lot of balance or a santulan. So they live with that kind of simplicity around them, but then they do like to decorate parts of their houses, which is what gives them pleasure. There's also, of course, a visible joy and khushi, which they express through color. So they don't hesitate to use color. And the color, whether it's seen on the walls, or whether it's seen in the art, or whether it's seen in the tiles of the flooring, I think all of this is actually something which is speaking to us, that this is what they, sort of delight in. And therefore, the same thing gets translated into the craft as well. Yeah. Extremely selective about bringing in certain aspect of the so to say, Nakashi or the craft, because it's not like, of course, there are places which have excessiveness as well, and those are also because of the certain aesthetic that it believes in. But otherwise, it is about being Chuninda. It is about being in sort of just about the kind of proportion that it works. And of course, now where does this all come from? So this, just to give the reference, the images that I had used are from our clusters, which is Pochampalli, Banaras, Bhuj, and Srinagar. Going back to the glorious past, now again, if you look at the architecture, there is a little bit of, so to say, a very sort of composition which is about subtlety. It is about a lot of color blocking. It is about gravitas. It has a lot of simplicity which is brought in, and it is not necessarily always that you would see palaces to look like palaces as we see them today. There are always areas in our architecture which bring in the calm or the sukoon. There is always the central courtyard, or there is something which is about the angan, or which is like a space where people come together, and these are spaces which are designed so as to bring in that calmness into our life. So the architecture is also sensitive to that aspect. Similarly, art and kala finds place on the walls. So it is again something, but in certain proportions, in certain spaces, which is just to highlight. And then, of course, there is all about expanse. So if you look at the old architectural marvels, there is a lot of expanse, and there is a lot of phelau, and it is never about, not again, clutter. At this point, what I would also do is that I'll probably highlight a few of the pieces that you see here. And I think specifically we've chosen this because we also work on actually reviving certain pieces in terms of what was originally known as, textile from that region, but over the years it has brought into, and I maybe can use the word Bollywoodization, where we have actually gone into the garishness of the textiles, and we see this as, like Banaras, for example, was always known for these kind of Sofiana rang. And when I talk to the, the older weavers, they actually have such beautiful names for it, like something like pista or sharbati or falsai, or these are the kind of colors, because again, they took it from what they saw around themselves. So like, for example, this particular piece is almost like a non-color, and that's why I think it is so beautiful. And if you look at the older vocabulary of colors, these are the kind of colors people actually talk about. Again, very, very simple, and not necessarily the fuchsia pink and the royal blue that we tend to connote with Banarsi textiles. This is a marvelous piece from Pochampalli, which is again actually using 9 motifs. But then the 9 motifs are so perfectly balanced by the use of just 2 colors. And the whole beauty of the complexity of so to say, the maximalism of the motifs gets so beautifully balanced by the minimalism of the color. So I use that as, again, a reference of how one can actually look at craft and weaves to balance that out. These are 2 beautiful pieces which, again, this grey is actually inspired by the motifs of William Morris. Now, again, it's a very British influence, but how beautifully it translates into our Indian vocabulary. And this is another beauty about Indian textiles, that they have been constantly evolving. And anything which has to have a relevance has to continually evolve. And that Banaras has always been really open to, which is why you see a lot of British florals into it. And then there was of course, there was a classical jal formation, but then it kept changing its interpretation as and when there were traders who came in from different parts of the world. While that is more like a classical jal, but again, of course, the red Banarsi has a different place in it, but here you see it equally beautifully done in a black. Here are some more black and gray pieces. I mean, this piece, if you would like to see it later, but I think what really spells it apart is that you can't even make out what is the front and the back of it. Now, this is the kind of weave that gives you goosebumps. But look at it how it is maximal. It is a maximal piece, but then just by the sheer skill of it, you know that it is not about just maximalism. There's a lot of hidden beauty in it. And that's a Rangkat creation, which again, when it becomes, like this is a technique where you color block, and then you sort of create a central motif. And this, again, I would say that it just, again, spells simplicity to me. It's also about the eye, as to how the eye views it. Now, when it came for us to see how, so these are just a few more examples of the intricacy and barikiyat that we talked about. At the same time, having the celebratory feel and the pop colors, and because this is all a part of what you see around yourself. So this particular one is Hamami in the Srinagar. It's called Shahi Himam. No, not Shahi Hamam, I'm sorry. But look at the use of the flowers and the colors, because this is what they see in their spring, and they wanted to show it in their architecture as well. And then when we thought of housing these textiles, we actually wanted to be really conscious of the fact that we do need to house them in an environment which does not speak ethnic, does not speak rustic, does not speak, very typically what people connote India as. And therefore, we created this space which actually talks about the things that I said, the expanse, the beauty, the arches, the place to breathe, so that there is, while textiles need to be the hero, of course, but there has to be things around it which spell a space that is complementary to them. So giving this kind of a small context, I would now go to my lovely panelists, and I would like them to perhaps also sort of whatever we just saw. So I can start with Sonam. And so whatever you just saw, I would like to hear their point of view as to how do they view architecture, and how do they sort of think of it as where in the continuum do they think Indian architecture is?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. Amrita, thank you. Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, Manish. I'm not an expert, and I don't proclaim to be, but I think for me, everything you've said about minimalism is absolutely spot on. When I think of the architecture, even of the Mughal architecture, for example, there was space to breathe, even for the art forms. So there were large, vast, empty canvases, large, vast walls, and within those, there would be motifs that were created. So any work of art, to my mind, any artistry needs space to breathe so that you can interpret it yourself. It allows you that space for interpretation. Whether it's the intricacy of the Taj, it wasn't a bunch of garish colors that they did. They did white on white, and that's what makes it so very beautiful. And I was thinking of this dupatta that you were talking of. I think it's a dupatta or a sari, the black one. It's a sari. And I know you said it was maximalist, but it doesn't feel maximalist to me because of the repeat motif. Right. And in music as well, if there is a repeat motif, you are able to create some sort of vajd, a sense of junoon, because you keep getting lost in that repeat motif, which despite its intricacy then simplifies it down for you because you allow yourself to keep... It anchors it, it roots it, and that repetition, whether it's a chant, for example, that repetition simplifies it down. So I feel that everything you've said, about the architecture and the inspirations are beautiful, but even in the intricacy, I think there is simplicity when there isn't crowding of ideas. As long as there is one theme, one idea, you stay in the minimalist space. That's just my understanding of it.
Thank you. Penny,
yeah, no, this is very beautiful, and I like the way you have put a minimal word like sukoon and a maximal word like calm. I'm saying that quite consciously because in language we sometimes overuse these words, right, and yet the meaning comes out in what we are familiar with, which is the sukoon. So I liked that you have juxtaposed that together, and that's so true of the architecture or textile or many of the art and crafts form, that there is a grandeur, and yet there is the detailing.
That's right.
So it is a macro visual which you showed in the buildings or in the space you have here, but it is the detailing that ultimately defines what aesthetics is, and that's very beautiful, both in textile and architecture. And that's probably the quality mark, right? It's not just the loudness. So it's not the colors, for example, that necessarily are loud, because that's the environment, but particularly color in a context of, as you said, in their own festivals or their environment. It is springtime, so it is replete with colors. So these are the facets that we connect with, and hence to see them on textiles or crafts or architecture is particularly bonding, connecting, emoting, and that's what architecture and textile and art forms should do. So that's very beautiful. Thank you.
So in the pictures that you've shown, there's so much intricacy and detail, and also we're perceived as a very maximalist country, but I think we've found a delicate balance with maximalism and minimalism. When there's so much intricacy as well, it doesn't seem overbearing because of the neutral palettes that's used. So I feel like in the past, people have found a really wonderful balance, and I feel like that's something to take away from and inspire modern architecture.
Hold it closer.
Closer, yeah.
Okay, this is good?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cheers.
Right. Sure. So I think I'll first start with Sonam now. So, would you like me to play the, yeah? So we'll have a beautiful piece from Sonam, which is almost mesmerizing, and it is just beautiful and yet impactful. So it's calming, soothing, and impactful. And it has so much therav in it, and I think that might be a good way to begin your conversation. And yeah, so maybe if we can play that. So can we have the... I would have liked Sonam to actually sing here, but she is not keeping too well, and therefore I did not sort of, but I would still, I'm sure something will inspire.
Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls.
जब जुल्मों सितम के कोहे गरा,
where words come out from the depth of truth.
जब जुल्मों सितम के कोहे गरा, रूई की तरह उड़ जाएंगे.
Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection.
रूई की तरह उड़ जाएंगे हम महकूमों के पांव तले. हम महकूमों के पांव तले. ये धरती धड़ धड़ धड़केगी.
Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit.
ये धरती धड़ धड़ धड़केगी और अहले हकम के सरू पर जब बिजली कड़कड़ कड़केगी हम देखेंगे.
Where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action.
लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे.
Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
हम देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे.
Some of it is coming back, but somewhere, somehow, I think the less is more kind of thing is lost, and we hear music more today as cacophony, and we hear it as orchestration and everything, and therefore, again, a Bollywood effect, perhaps, to some extent. So, what do
Absolutely.
you have to say about how you view it and how you would like
I mean,
to
I
see
think
it?
everything that you've said is absolutely 100% correct, because we have lost, as I said even earlier when we were referring to architecture, we have lost the ability perhaps to appreciate music in its truest form. I mean, I think today what Harini did with just voice and guitar was lovely because it allowed for the lyric to be heard. And we've forgotten to appreciate the lyric. And for me as a musician, the lyric has always been important. What I want to say through the music has always been of greater import. I mean, I think when I started to sing, I decided I wanted to be a musician with a message. And in order to put forward that message, my message wasn't ke ut ke nachiye, because I'm going to have incredible, like a drum section and a loud bass, and that's what's going to happen. My message was, I want you to hear the words of the music. I want you to stop and think, and I want to give you the spaces in the music to think. So I do think that what's happened is, firstly, we've got, and you and I were talking about this morning, there is an Instagramification or almost a narcotification of the mind that's happened with Instagram. And what that's led to is this, everyone thinks things are trending, which means basically we've become a herd mentality. So if one kind of song does well, then everyone must make the same kind of music. We must make short form music. We must no one has the time to dwell on things. No one has all these pressures are stifling creativity. I mean, when I'm making music, I'm told by the studio guy, I'm told by my own accompanying musicians, कि सोनम जी 3 मिनट का गाना बनाएंगे, 4 मिनट का गाना बनाएंगे, उससे लंबा नहीं बना सकता. I said, उसमें तो आधी कहानी भी नहीं मेरी शुरू हुई, तो मैं क्या उस 3 मिनट 4 मिनट में मैं क्या बोलूँ आपको of any value, of any worth? If I want to say something to you that I feel will touch your heart or impact it, आराम से इत्मीनान से बैठ के बातें करेंगे ना. I'm not going to have a quick, even a conversation we have with a friend. You don't achieve anything, you don't heal your soul, you don't fill your cup, you don't fill your heart if you have a 2-minute conversation with someone. You fill it if you can sit and you can unpeel the layers. And music and art should really be about having that time. It shouldn't be about following trends. And I do think that so much of our minds are being not just filled with Instagram, but music, everything gets filled and it becomes clutter in our heads, and we're all learning to live. We've all become like these machines who are living with this very maximalist sense. And there is such beauty in this minimalism when you think about it. You wake up in the morning and किसी दूर जगह से आवाज़ आ रही है अज़ान की, या गुरुद्वारे से आवाज़ आ रही है या मंदिर से आवाज़ आ रही है, और एक आवाज़ आ रही है, वो जो सुकून उसमें मिलता है, you don't get that anywhere else. So I think that there has been a bastardization of music. I do believe that we've become so obsessed with, this over-embellishment. दिखाना भी है किसी को तो 10 ताने दिखाएंगे, 500 बारी मुर्की लेंगे. It's the simplicity of music, the simplicity of holding a note. I mean, even when I work with my musicians sometimes and I'm trying to create a musical piece and I'm like, okay, play this note and let it hang. They look at me like I'm a mad woman. Because like, what do you mean let it hang? उस खाली 4 बार में हम क्या करेंगे? I said वो फिर वहीं रहेगा. जैसे कोई बारिश से बूंद गिरती है ना, तो 2 मिनट के लिए आप उस बूंद को देख लें. उसमें भी खूबसूरती है. So that is not happening anymore, and we're not allowing it to happen. So yeah, I do think there has become a lot of noise in music, a lot of noise in our heads. We've got accustomed to it. And we really need, in order to create, in order to be creative, and even in order to absorb, as listeners, as human beings, we need to allow ourselves the space to breathe. You know, and we need to allow silences, because only in the silences will you hear the music, or will you hear your own heart, the music of your own heart.
In fact, you said this about this also, that you like the silence in the interludes. In
So this was,
yeah.
this was really said, as was a response to CAA when it happened. And I heard it in my head in the bathroom, because I was so angry with what was happening, the divisiveness in the country, and the fact that one, important part of India was being targeted. And I just did not like how my country was being fragmented. And I decided that I wanted to take a well-known Hum Dekhenge, which has of course been sung by greats, and it's always been sung in the same way, table ki sangat ke saath, and the harmonium or whatever. And I couldn't hear it like that. I wanted to say it as a quiet rebellion, but I wanted, in the spaces where music should have come in between the antras, I decided the voice would be the interlude. And so I reached out to my friend Sunil, and I said, listen, I keep hearing Tagore's Where the Mind is Without Fear as the perfect juxtaposition to this, and they were both quiet acts of rebellion. And I do believe that when Faiz Sahab wrote this, he didn't necessarily write it loudly. And I also don't believe that if you want to be heard, you have to be shouting. You can have quiet resistance also with ek sthir tarike se, when you're saying santulan se, with balance, with calm, you can be heard. So everything doesn't have to be loud music. It doesn't have to be filled with 50, string instruments coming and then some shakers in the background. And, it's just, I feel exhausted when I hear music like that. I can't, it just, my mind goes into some sort of tizzy. And I think therefore most of the music I create also is about, just slowing down. We all live such hectic lives, and I mean, that's what music and art was supposed to do for you. I was telling you something lovely, and it's a slight digression, and yet it's kind of relevant. I was listening to someone who said, when your children are young, teach them music, teach them art, teach them poetry, teach them everything that they want to learn that's related to the arts. Not for the sake of becoming good, but for the sake of becoming. And what he meant by that was allow your soul the space to become, allow your soul to feel, because when you feel, you start to heal. And just those are the things we're not allowing ourselves. We're just allowing this barrage of music and 50 different... If you listen to somebody sitting next to someone on a plane, you will know what I'm saying. There will be, Aaj sheher mein ye hua, and there's this like graph, and you're like, oh my God, imagine what that's doing to the brain. So yes, with music also, music should be heard, and it should be, the lyrics should be heard, and you hear that beauty of that one sitar, and then you hear the beauty of the tabla. Everything needs space, and we should try and come back, I believe, to a world, especially with Indian music, where we had that space for each of these instruments and voices.
Like I said, the textiles need that breathing space and the space around them to house them. I think you said this very beautifully in the morning as well, that it does impact you as to where you are singing and what is around you, how the stage decor is, how is the space appearing, because for you to be able to, so to say, set a mahal to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful thought, because it is never in silo. All these things actually work as a sort of complementary and together.
Absolutely. I mean, any space that you are in inspires you. And there will be times, I was telling him, I said, if I'm in a very maximalist space with a very garish decor, and maybe, I mean, as artists, we're empaths. So we're also really, sensitive to the spaces around us, to a conversation we might have had with a friend, or to what happened 5 minutes before we get onto stage. Yes, we're able to take away from all of that when we get onto stage, because we go into some form of ibadat, meditation when we are on stage. But it is very beautiful, and I think art in general is all of this is connected so very beautifully. And if we could bring back, and I think India was known for that, right? We are the land of yoga. We are the land of slowing down. And yet we are living this very, and even though, yes, there's been maximalism in our intricacy, but it's also been always so aesthetically done, right? So I think now what's happened is, and with all due respect to the West or global culture, let's just say, what's tending to happen is we are losing a little bit of our roots, and we're not understanding that there can be beauty, there's too much pressure on this maximalist success, right? And of living up to someone else's life. But there can be beauty in just taking all that away, all those dreams, those aspirations necessarily, which are maximal related, and just focusing on the journey, and you will find that success. You know, I always believe that if you're going to chase after that person's life or this success, so that then what's happening to your craft? So much of your time is being spent on all of that outside stuff. So I'm reasonably minimal, and I hope I can continue to be minimal.
Being Rohit, sorry.
We're in the age of instant gratification, and we've not been taught how to handle instant gratification. And I feel like we're coming a full circle wherein mindfulness is slowly starting to come back. And there's nothing, a soothing song and a slow song is very healing. I feel like it's coming a full circle, and hopefully in the future, you know, slow music will be really
I'd
nice.
like to hear from you, Rohit, because you have sort of reinvented a craft. And I would say reinvented in a very, not just loosely, but I would say that a craft which anyway is so beautiful by itself, because I think I find it really amazing that somebody actually thought of using the black soil and sort of giving it a treatment on metal to actually create this beautiful thing of black and silver. So I'm wearing black and silver in honor. But you've done some excellent work in making it relevant for now. So we'd like to hear from you as to how you've done this continuum from where to where.
Absolutely. I'd like to start by painting some context
sure.
of
So we can
what we're
play
doing.
the small video. Yes.
All right. So, Knoll was the name of the company that I started. On a higher level, what we're doing is we're reimagining traditional Indian craft forms and merging them with modern design to make collectible objects. And collectible objects, higher level, is defined as something that is one-off or limited edition with a lot of intricacy, artistry, and things like that. So the craft form that we're working with is the Bidri craft form. It's a 600-year-old metal inlay craft form, and it's got Persian origins. Its aesthetic is floral and geometric. So I'll just give you a quick insight into how intricate the craft form is. I'll play a couple of videos about the process. So the artisan there is making a 0.5 mm groove in metal. That's half the thickness of a debit card. And the coin that you see here is just this big. It's just zoomed in for effect. And after the engraving, they take a silver wire and pressure fit it in. Sorry. Yeah. So what I've shown till now is a 600-year-old process that has been existing. Where we come in is we're reimagining this craft form, and we're doing that by looking at it through contemporary lenses, say like minimalism or parametric architecture, things that you don't usually associate with crafts. Here's a quick teaser of what we're doing. So all the silver and brass that you're seeing there is metal inlaid like I showed in the process. So I'll just pick up a case study. This is a case study of Bidri meets organic forms. And when I mean by organic forms, it's a bit like an amoeba, where you can't classify it as a shape. And here's a piece that we've made with Bidri. It's about 5.5 feet wide and about 1.5 feet tall. Here's another thematic. It's Bidri meets mathematics, wherein I was very inspired by this artist called Nasreen Mohammadi. She only works with straight lines and has a way of making them speak and curve. And with this, we made... So that's a piece in progress. So this is a 7.5 feet sculpture that we've made in Bidri. So to the topic of maximalism and minimalism, on the left are the traditional inlays that Bidri usually did, and on the right is an example of our reimagination. And another innovation that we've done is in terms of scale. Bidri used to make 10 to 12 inch figurines. You must have seen them around homes, pandabis, vases, and things like that. And we've blown up the scale with a lot of design intervention and R&D to make pieces like that. Yeah, that's...
It is truly amazing to see how one can reinterpret and bring a totally new, more of the same can you consume. And that's when you have to find possibilities. But Amita, I would like you to comment on even the way Indian thinking is. And I think somewhere in the Indian thinking itself, we think in a manner which takes us all the time back to simplicity. And maybe not anymore, but yes, in which ways?
Yeah, thanks. I think the elegance really lies in simplicity. And so if you imagine, and I was thinking about food as that was going to be one of your, पर एक थाली परोसी है और उसमें 4 चीज़ें रखी हैं, तो उसकी ब्यूटी कुछ और ही है. और एक थाल रखा है, उसमें 15 पकवान डाल दिए हैं कटोरियों में, अच्छे दिखते हैं, पर वो 15 हैं और वो थोड़ी घिच-पिच लगती है. तो एक ज़माना था कि एक थाली में, और थालियाँ भी इतनी बड़ी नहीं हुआ करती थी, unless you were eating together. Frequently that was also the case. So there is a concept of simplicity that has existed. Kolam is a case in point. So in the morning, you just put a very simple, because it was a question of time, but it was still aesthetic, it was still very beautiful. It had a function as well, I'm given to understand, but that is what was part of your daily life. And you used material that also, be it textiles or be it metalware, homeware, very often recycled saris, old saris or dhotis, and all of that would reappear as a cushion cover or a godri, and or what we now call an applique is a name that's come in, but that was happening over generations, because we believe in repurposing, recycling, reimagining a use of what it has already served and what can it do now. And there was not only the aesthetics and the values seen in the material, but it was incredibly well thought through to keep the carbon footprint low. I mean, we never thought about the carbon footprint. The architecture that we see in your visuals, they were flowers from your own backyard or front yard or in the environment, the leaves, the trees, all of that was from your environment. Today we try to get ferns in and other things in, which is nice. I think we cannot say that these things don't have a purpose. I think it's all right to look beyond your own window and front yard and backyard, but it is nice to bring them in. But how do you integrate that? And hence the concept of minimalism and maximalism. It becomes maximalism when it does not kind of seem like it belongs.
True.
You know,
yeah.
when it belongs, then no matter, as you
just
said,
sits within.
that while it is a very intricate piece of sari, it speaks to you. It connects you because there is that detailing. It's something that I can connect with. And if it doesn't, so your beautiful visual of that scale. And I must say, I grew up in a fern land, so I saw ferns in that bidri, in that large thing, which I thought was so beautiful because it connected. It had a relevance. And so the Indian thought and the Indian tradition perhaps allows, because we've had these various influences and cultures and heritage that we have been able to take over. And we should keep it that way. I mean, Azan has a purpose in music, in life, in emotion, as much as a ghant of a mandir. And they belong together.
And without loudspeakers. Hopefully.
Without loudspeakers. So how do you keep it relevant? And if we can keep it relevant, then I think we don't have to worry about maximalism. And if we have to go far away to come back home, well, we do that. It's all right.
True.
But I think what you've just said about it keeping it relevant, I also love what you've done in as much that you've taken a form that would have, an art form that would have otherwise died.
Right.
Because I think that, tastes have changed, and understandably so. You've interpreted it without making it loud or garish or over the top. You have kept the essence of the simplicity, the fineness, the intricacy of this beautiful art form, and you've interpreted it into
fresh.
But also into. You were very clear in the kind of lines you chose. I know you said non-organic forms, but none of them were large or fussy forms. They were large, but they were not fussy, and I think that then allows the intricacy of this. Again, we come back to what you started with. That if you have a large canvas and you allow space for any art form to breathe, then that in itself respects the art form and it doesn't take away from it. So I think that minimalism does allow that form of respect to happen.
I feel like maximalism can very easily go into being kitschy or eclectic, but if maximalism is put together in a tasteful manner,
I think, what you just said.
yes, kitsch could be fun, but sometimes it could be a bit overbearing, but if the palette and...
I mean, if you look at the textiles, if you look at Indian weddings these days, speaking of textiles, no one's going to be wearing these beautiful things. Everyone wants bling, and that's a huge example of maximalism.
It's a huge loss also.
Huge loss, but we've also forgotten what India is famous for, and there's so much beauty. Everyone's just going to, at least in Delhi, we have Chandni Chowk, and everyone's मुझको बस चमक धमक लिबास चाहिए और कुछ नहीं चाहिए. And यही हो गया कि म्यूजिक में भी चमक धमक, अपने घरों में when you build a house, चमक धमक के लोग क्या कहेंगे, what will people say, not, that's become a huge part of this.
No, but I think what you also said, that it travels to the West and if it has to come that way, but like Indian superfood also. How the ragi and the bajra and moringa, all of this has come back to us through a route which was always our staple diet, and we have gone back to saying that we should eat local. But lovely conversation. I think we are short on time now. We have
we'll take a couple of questions to complete this
be lovely.
minimalistic circle. Yes. So anyone who would like to ask, the mic will reach you. Yeah, please.
I'm Pradeep. The transformation of Bidri, my question to you, into some other form may need a new name. Okay, in my view, that new form that you have shown, they don't remind me of Bidri. Okay? Maybe you need a new name.
Okay, so Bidri is characterized by two things. One, the metal inlay, and also the patination process. So the metal, when we start off, is silver in color. But then there's a patination process that happens where the Bidar Fort soil is used in it to get its signature black matty luster. So we tried to stay true to its roots by not moving away from inlay and the Bidri. And we didn't want to create a new craft form. We just wanted to reimagine it. So I like the idea of creating new craft forms, but maybe sometime in the future.
Hi, good afternoon. Lovely talk by all of you. Just a quick, and this was just a feeling. I think, do we feel that maximalism is not really a thing that should be looked at, or is it necessarily, great, or it doesn't serve a purpose? And this is open to, did feel, and that's the feeling that I got. But yes, minimalism does have its place. But where do we fit in maximalism? Anyone, please. This is an open to the entire panel.
Actually, and the question that you also asked, I have a very strong opinion about that as well, that, when a craft comes from a certain region, its signature should not be lost. So we should not be in a place where we distort it to the point where it starts to not be identified. And that's the word you used. But I think there is a tight rope there, and if you continue to make it the way you've seen it over centuries, like I said, how many more surahis can people have? So the purpose will be lost. I think about 15 years back I saw that somebody had made cufflinks in Bidri, and I thought that was, but it's a small sort of thing. But to come to your point, when I was asked this question, I said I am almost like a schizophrenic, because I have so many minimal aspects in me and so many maximal aspects. And I think that is why we are constantly saying that it's a continuum and there is no sides to it. And I think very beautifully put by both of you as well, that when it is in the context, even maximalism looks beautiful. It's only when it is not in the context is when it hurts your eye or your aesthetics. And that also is a personal choice. So I don't think we were actually ever saying this over that, but I hope we were able to say it as how it both coexists, and it needs to coexist because certain things need, I'm sure.
I'm on the same page as you. I don't think that maximalism is bad necessarily, even though I am more of a minimal person. But that's just the way I think. And that doesn't mean I don't love kitsch and I don't love the color of the Punjab, for example. But I feel like anything, if it's done tastefully, if really loud colors are juxtaposed beautifully, like a fuchsia and an orange, or a parrot green, a lime green with a fuchsia and an orange, I think it can look spectacularly beautiful. But there has to be santulan, really, as long as we can find balance. And what tends to happen, I think, with maximalism is we're losing that balance, because everything's becoming just so loud, everything's becoming just so in your face, that as a human being, then what do I focus on? So especially in terms of music, I think that for me it's really important that when you listen to a piece of music, you leave with a fairly clear takeaway. Not just, wow, that was noisy and I'm glad I got to leave her concert because my ears are hurting now because the bass was so loud and this was so loud and there was... I don't want to overload your senses. So for me as an artist, the overload of senses, the sensory overload, that kind of maximalism I certainly don't agree with. So that's my view on that level of maximalism. But minimalism, I think, wins a little bit for me.
Just to build on what you're saying, I feel like a good mainstream example is Sabyasachi, and especially Sabyasachi stores. They're very, very layered, and they use so many colors, but it doesn't seem overbearing. On the contrary, it actually feels warm and cozy. So I think that's a good example of...
Yeah, so again, it's a perspective.
Point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like that's one example of minimalism being used tastefully, at least in my opinion.
May I add to this? I think I'll go back to the aspect that it depends on the context, Vaibhav. If it is a wedding sari, I might choose, an understated one rather than a loud one. If it is home decor, I might choose this over that. That's a subjective thing, and thankfully each one can have their subjectiveness because they have to live with that, in that. But I also feel that a requirement of maximalism sometimes could be to make a statement, and to make a statement that is heard and seen. And I know that there are spheres where, because one is not heard, or seen, you have to make that loud statement. I know where you're coming from. LGBTQAI+ must be heard, and it is colorful. And it has to have the rainbow colors. It has to have the noise that it needs to make. It must be seen and heard and exposed to, and it is loud. It's all right. It is loud because it needs to be loud. The day it does not need to be loud, you will probably not be shouting. And I think it is a context. Now, that does not mean that you will not wear an understated kurta when you present ibadat. The word was used, but it was presented here 2 days ago by the two Kathak dancers here. So it is something that you have to select. It's only when it begins to jar such that it deadens the senses. That's not a good idea. To awaken your senses, as the LGBTQI plus does, that is required. But to deaden the senses, the sensibilities, the beauty and the aesthetics, that's when maybe I would begin to cringe and say, okay, chalo, bahut ho gaya. Hai na?
Thank you. I think there's one more question. Sorry.
One more question, one last. Okay. Now I'd like to take the lady at the back. You?
Ma'ams and sirs, there's been a recent trend of IKEAizing your homes where we have geometric furniture, whites and greys, and that's what we as a family did too when we moved into our recent home. And personally, my old home felt much cozier to me compared to my new home. It almost feels robotic. It's all geometry. It's all, white and here and there lines of gray. So I want your opinion on why this happened, because I know it happened for a reason, and what impact is it creating on our minds now?
I'd love to answer that. Yeah, so I don't know, you've all seen the ad, which is Piyush Pandey's very famous ad, Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai. And I love that ad, Asian Paints ad, and I love it because for me a home is a reflection of your personality. You cannot go and live in a cookie cut house, because then you are living in a space which could be an auditorium, which could be a conference room, which has been designed by X person, and I don't get it even when people say that, okay, I've hired so-and-so to do my house. But that is a specialization and it's a need. But your personality has to come through. So if IKEA is your personality, if Scandinavian, if minimal Scandinavian furniture is your personality, yes, it is the place which will give you comfort. But otherwise, I think every house has to have your personality. Just as what you wear on yourself, similarly, the house has to have things which reflect your personality. So that's how I would look at it. And maybe you can redo the house. There's always a chance to, find it somewhere.
If your house is not feeling like your house, then, maybe you chose IKEA because it was easy to assemble furniture, or it was within a budget, or for whatever space constraints. Add elements, like Manish said, in the home that make it feel like yours. Get a beautiful set of ikat cushion covers or Pochampalli cushion covers. Get a lovely, a brass lamp. Bring in things that are you, and bring in art that is you. And maybe then the blank canvas of IKEA will allow each of these pieces to speak out even more than they did in your old home.
True.
Thank you, Manish, Sonam, Amita, and Rohit, for a very balanced talk where it really didn't seem that, you were taking sides of anything, though you were, we were talking of very meaningful words like Santulan and Therav and Sukoon, which Amita immediately connected with. This actually, while you all were talking, I kept thinking, less is more. And that's something which, we seem to be inching towards just one section of the society, while one section is actually inching towards more is less. Much more is less that way. But I guess that's how it all balances out, because you are reflecting what you believe in, what your personality wishes to reflect, and of course, what your purse can afford. So that's how probably, a bit of the answer there. Thank you so much, and we look forward to
all three of you.
Yes, we look forward to more engagements, but I still feel that the whole session is a bit incomplete without even at least 30 seconds of...
I haven't been well, otherwise I wouldn't say no. I had the worst food poisoning. I'm sitting here.
Thank you for coming despite that.
Of course I was going to... Zaban ke pakke hain hum, but Even if I was sick, I would leave to go, but I was going to be here. But I'm coming back next year to
Absolutely,
sing
you are.
full, do a proper concert for you.
All
so
right.
then you can come with time, because it's not going to be hurried, it's not going to be maximal. I mean, it's weird. You've asked me to say something, maybe I can say something, and January tends to bring this poem back into my head a
Chaliye.
lot. And I'm going to invoke my mother, as I often do, because she's the reason I sing. She's the reason that I have the gift, I believe, of music in my life. My mother wrote something before I had created the Sufi Gospel Project, many years before that. And when a few days before I was going to debut it, and I was nervous because I was talking about Sufism in a different aspect. I was talking about how Hallelujah meets Allahu meets Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha meets Ek Omkar, and I said, Sab bolenge, pagal ho gayi hai. And the nice thing was I didn't care about what there was a fear, but at the same time there was 100% wanting to go there and tell my truth. And then in my mother's diary I found beautiful words in which she had written, Guru mere saath khade hain, Guru mere saath khade hain, Gobind yahi to hain, Allah bhi maujood hai yahan, Allah bhi maujood hai yahan, to kaun kahan se hai? And if my Guru is standing beside me, and Gobind too is by my side, if Allah too is present here, then whose child am I? And just having you all here with all of our different backgrounds, I just wanted to share this with you. The next time, I promise you I won't disappoint you. There will be song.
कहते हैं ना, patience का फल हमेशा मीठा होता है. So we'll be patient for another 365
I'll be
days.
patient as well to come back to this lovely audience, the lovely organizers. Honestly, it's so special to be in Hyderabad. And the next time, she's promised to take me around and get me pearls. So
Definitely.
I'm definitely coming
Definitely.
back.
Round of applause, please. And can we all just collect here for a group photo and a very quick.
While that's happening, may I just announce also that at this moment, the final session is happening at Lit 1 with Rajmohan Gandhi. To have Gandhi himself, grandson, here for the 26th is very beautiful, with Harsh Mandar in conversation. And do stay back also for Priya Malik, who will be doing the finale of the Hyderabad Literary Festival 2025. Thank you so much, everyone.